When we talk about the Founding Fathers of the United States, we refer to a select group of leaders and political thinkers who played essential functions in the birth of this nation. But who exactly are these individuals, and why are they called the Founding Fathers? Among the most renowned are figures such as George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, and John Jay. These men not only led the American independence movement against Britain, but also played central duties in forming the government and fundamental laws of the United States. But why them? The title of Founding Father is bestowed not just because they were present at battles or signed important documents. They were architects of the new nation, shaping its most influential ideas, such as representative democracy, fundamental rights, and the separation of powers. These concepts did not emerge in a vacuum. They were inspired by various philosophical and political sources, including the European Enlightenment. Understanding the contributions of these men goes beyond recognizing their signatures on documents like the Declaration of Independence or the United States Constitution. We will delve into the stories of their lives, explore their philosophies, and discover how their personal and collective experiences shaped the decisions they made and, consequently, American history. Now, while these leaders certainly laid the foundations, it's important to recognize that their visions for the country were not always unanimous. They passionately debated among themselves about the best way to govern this new nation. While the Founding Fathers shared a common goal of establishing a new nation, their origins and backgrounds were quite diverse, reflecting the varied landscape of early American society. For instance, George Washington, born into a planter family in Virginia, had a largely practical education and acquired a robust understanding of agrarian life, which profoundly influenced his vision for America. Contrastingly, John Adams from Massachusetts was well educated, attending Harvard College and later practicing law. His rigorous legal background shaped his strong advocacy for justice and order in the young nation. Benjamin Franklin, perhaps one of the most eclectic of the Founding Fathers, was born in Boston but spent much of his life in Philadelphia. Starting as an apprentice printer, Franklin was largely self-taught and became an accomplished inventor, writer, and statesman, reflecting the Enlightenment ideal of the self-made man. His broad knowledge and international experience brought a unique perspective to the drafting of American foundational documents. Then there was Alexander Hamilton, born out of wedlock in the Caribbean and later moving to New York. His immigrant background and his experiences working from a young age in mercantile environments gave him a strong belief in a strong centralized government and an economic system that supported commerce and industry. These diverse backgrounds not only influenced their personal philosophies, but also how they interacted with each other and approached the creation of the Constitution. They brought to the table a rich tapestry of experiences and ideas, which were sometimes in harmony and at other times in conflict. This diversity was crucial in creating a balanced and robust framework for the new nation. As we see, the differences in the educational, social, and economic backgrounds of these key figures led to varied visions for America. This sets the stage for our next discussion: the heated debates and differing viewpoints that emerged as they came together to draft the Constitution. Building on the diverse backgrounds of the Founding Fathers, let's delve into how their collective ideas and experiences set the stage for the American Revolution, a pivotal moment in history. The journey to revolution was not a sudden occurrence. It was the culmination of growing tensions and a series of actions and reactions that deeply resonated with the philosophies of the Founding Fathers. Influenced by Enlightenment ideas, these men began to see an opportunity not only to address grievances, but also to advocate for a system of government that aligned with principles of liberty, democracy, and justice. For example, the imposition of British taxes, such as the Stamp Act and the Townshend Acts, without proper representation in Parliament, was seen as a direct challenge to the philosophical belief in the rights of individuals and the necessity of representative government. These laws did not sit well with the principle of no taxation without representation, a concept championed by leaders like James Otis and later by Samuel Adams, both critical figures in stoking the fires of revolution. The Boston Tea Party in 1773 serves as a prime example of these ideas in action. Orchestrated by the Sons of Liberty, a group that included several future founding fathers, This act of defiance was not just about the tax on tea, it was a symbolic rejection of arbitrary rule. It was these acts of defiance, grounded in the Enlightenment values of resistance to unjust authority, that galvanized wider public support and framed the struggle for independence. The intellectual contributions of these leaders, through pamphlets, speeches, and debates, also played a crucial role. Thomas Paine's Common Sense, for instance, was pivotal. Published in 1776, it argued persuasively for independence from Britain and democratic self-governance, echoing the collective sentiment of the Founding Fathers and pushing the American populace towards the idea of revolution. As we explore how the Founding Fathers' ideas translated into revolutionary action, we'll see that their vision and resolve were instrumental in moving from discontent to active rebellion. This naturally leads us to our next topic, the drafting of the Declaration of Independence, where these revolutionary ideals were crystallized into a formal assertion of autonomy. This document not only signified a bold assertion of independence from British rule, but also encapsulated the philosophies and aspirations that had been fermenting among the colonies. Thomas Jefferson, a Virginian lawyer and planter known for his eloquent writing and deep engagement with Enlightenment ideals, was tasked with the formidable role of drafting this historic document. Chosen for his ability to articulate the collective American sentiment, Jefferson's role was pivotal. Drawing on his own political philosophy and the intellectual environment shaped by his contemporaries, Jefferson crafted a text that would come to define the ethos of a new nation. The Declaration of Independence, drafted in June 1776 and adopted by the Second Continental Congress on July 4th, starts with a profound assertion of human rights, stating that all men are created equal and endowed with unalienable rights, including life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These words reflect the Enlightenment principles of individual liberty and the social contract, heavily influenced by thinkers like John Locke and Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Jefferson, along with a committee that included John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, Roger Sherman, and Robert R. Livingston, worked not only to declare the reasons for colonial independence, but also to justify it to a global audience. They detailed the grievances against King George III, emphasizing the colonies' right to revolt against a government that no longer protected their basic rights, aligning closely with the philosophical justification for overthrowing unjust rulers. This document was not only a declaration, it was a carefully crafted argument for the legitimacy of the new nation in the eyes of the world. The impact of the Declaration was profound, serving as a rallying point for the colonies and as a beacon of inspiration for future generations. As we delve deeper into the consequences and the broader context of the Declaration, we will see how this document did not merely mark a break with Britain, but also set the foundational principles for the future governance and identity of the United States. This leads us into our next discussion about the formulation of the Constitution and how these foundational ideas were translated into a working government. Following the Declaration of Independence, the newly formed United States faced the monumental task of creating a government that would embody the ideals set forth in their Revolutionary Manifesto. The Founding Fathers, aware that the Articles of Confederation were insufficient for the growing needs of the nation, convened at the Philadelphia Convention in 1787 to draft a new constitution. This gathering was a remarkable assembly of minds, featuring key figures such as George Washington, who presided over the convention, James Madison, often referred to as the father of the Constitution for his pivotal role in its drafting and ideas, and Alexander Hamilton, whose advocacy for a strong central government was influential in the debates. The drafting of the Constitution required the Founding Fathers to balance a range of regional, economic, and political interests. One of the most significant challenges was the question of federalism. How much power should be vested in the national government versus the states? This debate was critical in shaping the federal structure of the United States. James Madison's Virginia Plan proposed a strong central government with three branches: legislative, executive, and judicial, each designed to check and balance the others, an idea that drew heavily on Montesquieu's concepts of separation of powers. In contrast, the New Jersey Plan advocated for a single legislative body, with equal representation for each state, reflecting the concerns of smaller states about being overpowered by larger ones. The Great Compromise, or Connecticut Compromise, eventually resolved this by creating a bicameral legislature with proportional representation in the House of Representatives and equal representation in the Senate. This compromise was crucial in garnering the support of both larger and smaller states. Additionally, the Founding Fathers had to address the contentious issue of slavery. The 3/5 Compromise, which counted 3 out of every 5 slaves for purposes of taxation and representation, was a deeply flawed solution that reflected the severe compromises needed to achieve unity among the states. The Constitution's ratification in 1788 was not the end of the story. The addition of the Bill of Rights in 1791, championed by those wary of too much centralized power, ensured the protection of individual liberties such as freedom of speech, assembly, and religion, aligning with the Enlightenment values that had inspired the Revolution. As we see, the formulation of the Constitution was not just about creating laws, but about embedding the philosophical foundations of the new nation into a functional governance framework. This sets the stage for our next discussion on the Federalist and Anti-Federalist debates that emerged around the ratification of the Constitution, reflecting the ongoing tension between national authority and state sovereignty. After the formulation of the Constitution, a vigorous debate emerged that would define the political landscape of the new United States. This debate was primarily between two groups with differing visions for the future of the nation, the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. Understanding this division is crucial to comprehending how early American politics shaped the country's development. The Federalists, led by figures such as Alexander Hamilton, John Jay, and James Madison, supported the newly drafted Constitution, advocating for a strong central government. They argued that a robust national government was essential to maintain order and unity and to ensure the country's economic and military strength. Their views were encapsulated in a series of essays known as the Federalist Papers. These essays defended the principles of the Constitution and sought to alleviate fears of an overly powerful central government. On the other side of the spectrum were the Anti-Federalists, including prominent leaders like Patrick Henry, George Mason, and Samuel Adams. They were deeply concerned that the new Constitution gave too much power to the national government at the expense of the states. They feared that this centralization could lead to tyranny, similar to what they had fought against during the American Revolution. The Anti-Federalists were particularly vocal about the lack of a Bill of Rights, which they believed was necessary to safeguard individual liberties. The debates between these two groups were intense and highlighted fundamental disagreements about governance and human rights. The Federalists viewed the separation of powers and checks and balances built into the Constitution as sufficient safeguards against tyranny. In contrast, the Anti-Federalists were not convinced and continued to push for more explicit protections. This contention led to the creation of the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, which were ratified in 1791 as a compromise to address the concerns of the Anti-Federalists. These amendments secured critical freedoms, including freedom of speech, freedom of the press, and the right to a fair trial, which were essential to winning over the support of the Anti-Federalists for the Constitution. As we see, the debates between the Federalists and Anti-Federalists were not just political squabbles, but were pivotal in shaping the philosophical and operational frameworks of the United States government. These discussions underscored the diversity of thought among the Founding Fathers and demonstrated the complexities involved in transitioning from colonial rule to self-governance. Continuing from our discussion on the Federalist and Anti-Federalist debates, we now turn our attention to a critical outcome of those debates, the Bill of Rights. The inclusion of these first 10 amendments to the Constitution was pivotal, not only in appeasing the concerns of the Anti-Federalists, but also in laying a durable foundation for individual freedoms in the United States. The Bill of Rights was primarily pushed forward by the Anti-Federalists, who were adamant that the Constitution alone, as it was originally drafted, did not sufficiently protect individual liberties from potential government overreach. Their insistence stemmed from a deep-seated belief in protecting personal freedoms and limiting the powers of a central authority, echoing the fierce independence that fueled the American Revolution. James Madison, initially a skeptic about the necessity of a Bill of Rights, believing that the Constitution's checks and balances provided enough protection, came to champion these amendments. He took on the practical task of drafting them, recognizing that their inclusion was crucial for the ratification of the Constitution by all states. Madison proposed a series of amendments that were intended to safeguard fundamental civil liberties: freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of religion, the right to assemble and petition the government, and the rights of the accused, including protection from unreasonable searches and seizures, and the right to a fair trial. The Bill of Rights was ratified on December 15, 1791. This not only fulfilled a key demand of the Anti-Federalists, but also marked a significant moment in American history. It enshrined a list of prohibitions on government power, fundamentally shaping how Americans interact with their government. Each amendment in the Bill of Rights deals with specific issues that were hotly contested during the ratification debates and reflects a broader philosophical commitment to freedom and democracy. These amendments have become the cornerstone of American civil rights, influencing numerous Supreme Court decisions and the development of American law and society. They set a standard for human rights that has inspired movements within the United States and around the world. As we reflect on the importance of the Bill of Rights, it becomes clear how these early legislative decisions continue to impact the everyday lives of Americans and frame the nation's ongoing dialogue about liberty, justice, and the role of government. Building on our understanding of the foundational documents and principles that shaped the United States, we now turn to some of the key figures whose philosophies and leadership were instrumental in the formation of the nation. George Washington, James Madison, and Alexander Hamilton not only were significant in the Revolutionary and foundational periods, but also left lasting legacies through their unique beliefs and visions for America. George Washington, often revered as the father of his country, his philosophy was rooted in the principles of honor, national unity, and political independence. His leadership style was marked by his reluctance to seize power, demonstrated most notably by his decision to resign as commander-in-chief of the army after the Revolution, and later by stepping down after 2 terms as president. His farewell address is particularly telling, where he warned against the dangers of political parties and foreign alliances, reflecting his philosophy of nonpartisanship and independence. James Madison, known as the father of the Constitution, brought to the table a deep understanding of governance that was heavily influenced by his study of history and political theory. Madison's Federalist Papers, especially numbers 10 and 51, showcase his belief in a strong, well-constructed federal government that could prevent tyranny either by majority or by a minority. His thoughts on balancing power among various branches of government and between the states and the federal system have shaped much of the American political structure. Alexander Hamilton, the first Secretary of the Treasury, was a driving force behind the strong central government and an advocate for a robust financial system. His philosophies were shaped by his experiences as an immigrant and his work in finance. Hamilton's influence is evident in his authorship of much of the Federalist Papers, which argued for the ratification of the Constitution. He also envisioned an industrial future for the nation, championing economic policies that included the creation of the National Bank, support for manufacturing, and establishment of a public credit system. As we continue our exploration of the early history of the United States, it's essential to confront not only the accomplishments, but also the significant challenges and controversies that surrounded the Founding Fathers. Among these, the issue of slavery stands out as a particularly stark and enduring conflict that these leaders grappled with, reflecting broader tensions and contradictions in the nation's founding principles. The Founding Fathers, despite their revolutionary ideals of liberty and equality, were deeply entwined in a society that relied heavily on slavery. Figures like George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, both of whom owned slaves, embodied this contradiction. While Washington freed his slaves in his will, signifying a conflicted understanding of slavery, Jefferson, despite expressing opposition to slavery, failed to take substantial action against it during his lifetime. This dissonance between their ideals and actions has led to considerable debate about their legacies. James Madison also owned slaves, and while he played a fundamental responsibility in drafting the Constitution, he too could not resolve the moral and political dilemmas posed by slavery. The Constitution itself, with compromises such as the 3/5 Compromise and clauses that protected the slave trade for several decades, reflects the profound compromises made to accommodate slavery. The controversies extended beyond personal practices. The debates on how to integrate and manage slavery within the legal and economic frameworks of the new nation were intense. The Northwest Ordinance of 1787, passed under the Articles of Confederation and later affirmed under the new Constitution, prohibited slavery in the Northwest Territory, reflecting early attempts to limit the spread of slavery. However, these measures were far from resolving the issue, merely setting the stage for future conflicts. The inclusion of slavery in the political and economic foundations of the United States would eventually lead to catastrophic consequences, culminating in the Civil War. The Founding Fathers' inability to effectively address this issue casts a long shadow over their achievements and highlights the complexities of creating a new nation founded on the principles of freedom and equality, while simultaneously upholding a system of profound inequality. The constitutional framework, established by the Founding Fathers, with its system of checks and balances, federalism, and the Bill of Rights, remains the bedrock of American governance. This structure not only set the stage for a resilient government, but also provided a flexible system that could be amended and adapted over time. The ability to amend the Constitution has allowed for the expansion of civil rights and the addressing of issues such as voting rights, civil liberties, and social justice, reflecting the ongoing influence of the Founding Fathers' work. Moreover, the political philosophies of leaders like Thomas Jefferson and James Madison continue to inspire debates about the role of government, individual freedoms, and democratic values. The tension between states' rights and federal authority, a central debate during the drafting of the Constitution, remains a pivotal issue in American politics, as seen in contemporary debates over healthcare, education, and environmental regulation. The Founding Fathers' handling of slavery and their failure to resolve this issue had long-term consequences, leading to the Civil War and the ongoing struggle for racial equality. Movements for civil rights in the 20th and 21st centuries can be seen as continuations of the unfinished business of the Founding Fathers, demonstrating how their legacies are not static but continue to evolve.